Welcome to Get It Done Entrepreneurs, where we talk with founders of companies who bet on themselves and won. My name is Rich LeBrun, and I am the founder and CEO of LeBrun Advisory Group. You can find us at rlebrun.com. Our mission is to help our clients build wealth through business ownership. Stick around to the end of the show and we'll reveal how you can be our next guest. Our special guest today is Chris Majer, founder and CEO of the Human Potential Project. He's also creator of the Majer Factor. He is a modern-day entrepreneur, Amazon best-selling author, social innovator, business disruptor, and adventurer who trekked the wilds of Africa, Alaska, and the Amazon. He's a rugby player with a master's degree who has taught hand-to-hand combat to Marines and performance principles to the Special Forces. And with his work on leadership, management, strategy, and innovation, and organizational culture, he has led transformational cultural change projects in some of the top companies in the world. In 1981, he began by working exclusively with athletes to isolate and reproduce the elements of consistent winning performance. His success with individual athletes and teams caught the attention of the military, and he and his firm spent nearly 3 years working with the Army to design new ways of training soldiers. This culminated in a year-long classified project with the Army Special Forces. In the mid-1980s, the firm began working with corporate clients, again generating remarkable results. Under Chris's leadership, the firm grew into a skilled team of professionals working globally. Chris was a principal architect of transformational projects for corporate clients such as AT&T, Cargill, Microsoft, Intel, EDS, Capital One, and many more. His clients have documented some $4 billion in value that is generated by his work. He is the author of 20 white papers and a book called The Power to Transform, Your New Future Awaits. He has been featured in Time, People, Esquire, and has appeared on the Today Show, Charlie Rose, and the McNeil Lehrer Report. In addition, he has been featured in hundreds of local and regional TV, radio, and print media. Chris is a sought-after keynote speaker who has been featured at venues around the world. And with that said, Chris, welcome to the show.
Wow. Thanks, Rich. Glad to be here. That sounds like an impressive guy. I can hardly wait to hear him.
Yeah, I mean, you worked hard to build a resume like that.
Well, it's been a bit of an adventure, to be sure.
Well, good. Well, in fact, that's a great segue. Chris, we'd like to hear some of your story, how you became an entrepreneur, maybe what your first entrepreneur venture was, and how you got to where you are today.
Well, okay, let's just dive right into it. How I became an entrepreneur, I was immersed in it from birth. My dad owned a family business. We were the Ford dealers in Spokane, Washington. So I grew up around that. I was a teenager in the 60s. So Carroll Shelby and all those guys, those were my heroes. And I lived through all that, muscle cars and all that kind of stuff. When I was about 18, though, and full of myself, as we all are at that age, I told my dad I couldn't really see myself wearing a white belt, white shoes, and selling Pintos. So that didn't go over well. But I went off to the University of Washington. Now remember, now it's 1970, so everything erupted in those days. My first spring quarter at school consisted of being told to go out on the streets because I was a political science major and just be in the midst of all of it, right?
Yeah.
So in college, I took up rugby. I lasted on the Husky football team for about 2 hours as I had some issues with authority in those days. And I captained the team when I was a senior, went on to stay at the U for graduate school. And I grew up, just in that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? So I started a business with a buddy. We started and failed, I think, 2 or 3 different businesses. And then about the time I was 30, I was working enough to support my rugby playing habit. And this is going to sound strange, but I had a mystical experience, right? So every year there's a big tournament down in California, Monterey. Our team was invited. I get to the airport, and the book that I was reading, I'd left on my bedside table. Oh, crap. What am I going to do? I'm not the kind of guy who can stare out the window for 3 hours or read the in-flight magazine 10 times. So obvious solution, go to the bookstore and get another book. How hard is that to figure out, right? So everybody's been to the airport bookstore. There's the big wall of thrillers and histories and bodice rippers and whatnot. And I know this is going to sound strange, but believe it or not, this book started talking to me. And I'm not talking about an audio book, right? But it was literally like inside my head talking. I had no idea what the heck was going on. I'm looking around thinking somebody's fooling with me or something. But it was a book called The Ultimate Athlete by some guy named George Leonard I'd never heard of. Not shockingly, I bought the book thinking, well, cool, I'll learn something. I read it on the plane, and we landed down in San Francisco, and I was like, wow, I read most of this book. I have no idea what most of the stuff this guy's talking about is. It's synchronicity and intentionality and some Japanese energy called ki and some martial art I'd never heard of called Aikido. And, la, la, la. I said, so I don't really understand it, but I like it. I was drawn to it somehow. And that book, literally that moment, my life changed. So shortly thereafter, I quit playing rugby. I took up the study of Aikido. I met a guy who was a sports psychologist, and he was fascinating to me because he could explain experiences that I had had and written off as too many bangs on the head or flashbacks to the 60s, right? But he had sciencey sounding explanations, and I like that. Well, we were just young and naive enough to not know it was impossible, so we started a company. And the company was called Sportsminds, very first iteration of our business. He'd been a world-class skier. I was a rugby player. And we set out to work exclusively with athletes. And all we wanted to do was isolate and reproduce in others the elements that led to consistent winning performance. Seemingly simple mission. We built out a body of work, which was really just a modern version of the old Greek model, mind, body, and spirit, but we had contemporary methodologies to it. And we started working with our clients, individual clients, and we were doing tremendous stuff. They were getting tremendous results. We had one little problem. This was back in the early 80s now, before Nike and Adidas exist the way they do today. So all of our clients were amateurs and they were broke. Doing great work, not getting paid. Flaw in the business plan. So we turned our attention to teams. We saw the same thing that everybody's seeing. You could take a group of individuals who as individuals were terrific, put them together on a team, and the team would stink. And we go, well, rationally, that makes no sense. Where's this vaunted synergy that we hear about all the time? And not just in sports, but every place. So we built a body of work. We coined the phrase team cohesion in 1983 and went to work with national teams, Olympic teams, the U.S. rugby team, the Seattle Seahawks, again, doing great stuff. All of a sudden now, I find myself talking to the United States Army. This was never part of our business plan. Now, here comes my entrepreneur big business lesson number one, right? So I have no idea what I'm getting myself into. Here I am, I'm 30-some, 31 years old. I got my little coat and tie. I'm in Fort Hood, Texas in August. So I'd never experienced anything like that. I went out the motel room door at 8 o'clock in the morning and went, oh my God, I just stepped into hell. It's 98 degrees, seemingly 100% humidity. I had to go back inside and get a new shirt and then dash to the car so it didn't have to get a third one, right? So I find myself in a room full of colonels. We're talking about all these issues they had. They had drug abuse and alcohol abuse and soldiers who couldn't pass a physical fitness test and this and that and the other. And they just wanted to talk to us about the physical training test. And we listened and said, look, you're telling me you've got these 18 to 22-year-old kids who can't pass the Army's physical fitness test. My mother can pass that test. So it's not a physical problem. It's a wanna problem. And while we're at it, we could actually show you how to take care of all these things at once. And they looked at me like I was nuts. I said, well, it's called this kind of holistic solution. You don't see how all these things are interconnected. So I mapped out this process for them. And they said, wow, that's amazing. What's it going to cost? Well, I don't know. You were here. We just made this up. It's not like I'm Campbell selling you soup and here's tomato. We'll go make a budget. So we go over to the Sizzler in Killeen, Texas. I get out my little yellow pad, making up numbers, and it's the classic angel and devil. Oh, that's too much. Well, we'll negotiate. I thought you were the guy who complained about the $400 hammers. Well, I am. Well, I don't know what's anyway. So it was very loud in my head. Lunchtime. So we get back in the room. I lay this budget out on a flip chart, and I notice it's getting more and more quiet. I'm kind of thinking, ruh-roh. So finally, the colonel in charge turns to the guy next to him and says, well, Colonel, tell me what you think. Well, frankly, sir, I'd rather not say in front of him. No, come on. If we're going to do something, let's do it. If we're not, we're not. So I'm thinking, oh, nice job, Greedhead. You really blew it, right? He says, well, sir, we can take the armor assigned to the test unit in question, fire it up and let it idle for 15 minutes and burn $90,000. That's nothing. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Math was not my strong suit. I forgot to carry the one. It was a little too late for that conversation. So big business lesson number one, know your customer. That was like a rounding error for these guys to prove the point. They kind of wanted to prove the point subtly. We got done with all this. They said, let us show you the motor pool. I'm like, what? So they take me down to Motor Pool Road, which is about most of a mile long, 2 to 3 blocks wide, and there, baking in the sun in Texas, was billions and billions of dollars worth of all kinds of equipment that you can imagine and some that you can't. And then it just kind of dawned on me, oh, we're in a different game here now. Yeah. So big moment. So we
Big
did all this
moment.
stuff, it was massively successful. I get a call, some months later, Mr. Majer, this is Sergeant, Schmedlap, Colonel Potter would like to speak with you. And I'm going, Colonel Potter, that's that guy on MASH, right? I thought it was one of my goofy rugby playing buddies, so I hung up. Yeah, that wasn't so good. Phone rings again a few minutes later with a different tone of voice. Sergeant Schmedlap is sir, this Colonel William Potter of the 10th Special Forces Group, and he would like to speak with you, sir, and doesn't really appreciate being hung up on. This started a whole process that culminated. We had a year-long, you kind of highlighted it there, classified project with the Special Forces with a programmatic blank check to push the boundaries of human performance. So we designed for 3 months, delivered for 6 months, reported for 3 months. We set a whole bunch of records that are still untouched. At the end of that, I said to my guys, we've been fortunate. We've had an opportunity to develop and prove a methodology that works in 2 arenas where performance matters and where you can measure it. First with athletes, then with soldiers. I don't want to spend my whole career training soldiers, and please be clear, the actual work of training the soldiers was phenomenal. Nothing was better, nothing more rewarding. The process of getting to do it, the Army's contracting process was sufficiently odious that I don't want to have to hire 5 people just to keep track of all this, what's the technical term, bullshit that it takes to, get this going. So what we're going to do is we're going to pivot. We're going to turn our attention to the game of business. And actually, this one's going to be more challenging. And they all looked at me with that RCA dog looking. Oh, no, not more physically challenging, you nitwits. Think of it this way. In business, there's no stand down. There's no spring training. There's no off season. By our standards, they don't even do any real training. And on any given team, there's a vast gap in the level of competence and commitment on the part of the players. How do we work in that arena? So I said, I'm going to put together a business plan. I'm going to go raise some money. Now, in those days, there was this kid named Tony Robbins bouncing around and some guy named Werner. I said, I don't want my name on it because then we've just got a glorified mom and pop business, right? So we're going to build our business based on the power of our product, right? So off we went. I put together a plan. Everybody said I was nuts. And you have to remember now, it's the early mid 80s. There was none of this angel infrastructure and all that kind of stuff that exists today. And everybody says, well, good luck. And a couple guys in the business community I knew said, it's going to be a tough one. It's a service thing. It's a little woo-woo-wee. Most people won't understand it. Very first guy I talked to said, hey, this is the coolest thing ever. Wrote me a check for 450 grand in 1984. So I'm left with this was the unfortunate lesson that I walked away with was, what's so hard about that? What's the big deal about raising money? One call, piece of cake. We built out a corporate program, tested it on a subcontractor of Boeing's. Now, I have to say, from this point, well, actually from the beginning, Providence or something was smiling on us. I don't know if it was the confluence of entrepreneurial spirit and whatever, but every time we turned around, something was dished up for us. So the guy who was the investor's partner owned this company that we tested our product on. That was my first client. My second client was AT&T. I went from business obscurity. You can't get farther away from the business mainstream than Shelton, Washington, where this company was. And next thing I know, I'm in, Parsippany, New Jersey at AT&T headquarters. We went from 5 guys to 85 guys in 6 months. And as I tell everybody, without fear of contradiction, I made every stupid mistake you can make in terms of trying to grow a business, and it oftentimes succeeded despite my best efforts. And that launched us. I was everywhere. The Today Show, da 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 da. We did millions and millions of dollars worth of business with AT&T, and our marketing was really simple. It was called When Harry Met Sally. One division, and the guys next door went, "Damn, I'll have what they're having," right? So we did the consumer products division. When we got there, they'd gone through a massive downsizing. Imagine this, if you can: 40,000 to 16,000 in 9 months, thanks to McKinsey. And McKinsey was very proud of themselves because the financial hemorrhaging had quit. And as I delicately pointed out, that's because everything else quit. It's like the arrogant doctor crowing, "Well, the patient's quit bleeding." It's because he's dead, you halfwit. So they brought us in. How's this for a mandate? The name of the project was Project Miracles. We need a miracle. So we put 6,000 managers through this thing over 18 months. They went from break even. Over the next 48 months, they generated a cumulative total of $3 billion in profit for AT&T. Wow. Not shockingly, that got people's attention. So with literally no marketing or sales effort whatsoever, we worked our way through lots of AT&T divisions, and that took us into a whole bunch of those other companies that you talked about. And we were rocking and rolling, until COVID hit, which pretty much killed everything because, hey, all of our stuff was delivered live. So entrepreneurial pivot. So we put together online programs. The regular stuff is starting to come back. I'm in a rebuilding mode, a rebooting mode right now, trying to get us back to our past glory. And there's my short version, entrepreneurial story.
All right, so, if you would have turned left in the beginning, you'd be selling cars.
Yep.
You decided to
Pintos,
turn right.
not just any car.
A Pinto is exactly right. And instead you turned right, and here you are today. What a great story. Now I have to ask you, because you've grown into this, world-renowned guy of the secret sauce, the science behind whatever you got. I know you're a rugby player, but was this like learn on the go? I mean, you're just gathering data, finding out this performance stuff, and you capture it, or did you have some innate understanding of what it might be?
Well, I'm going to go with C, none of the above.
Right.
So being a rugby player, for the most part, I didn't really stop and think about it. Right? I just experienced stuff. And it wasn't until after I quit playing and was able to look back on it through some different filters. So I looked at it through the kind of the eyes of my sports psychologist friend. I'd done a master's degree in organizational development, so I could see it through those eyes. And then I had a series of teachers, and I think that's an important part, at least for my story, is I met a guy named Dr. Fernando Flores, who does some phenomenal work. I studied with him for 5 or 6 years. I studied with an Aikido teacher. I studied with meditation teachers. Right? And it was my capacity to both conglomerate all that stuff, but bring my own versions and things, because none of them had really much to say about teams, which was kind of my specialty. And we built this kind of hybrid, mostly mine, but drawing on pieces of other work from good teachers into this body of work that we, call our Human Potential Project.
Yeah. All right. So we'll get into this later, but I definitely you're an avid learner. We'll talk about that in the third segment. Besides hanging up on generals, is there something, I know you said you made a lot of mistakes. There's something key that you say, what, knowing what I know today, and what I did back then, here's how I'd coach myself not to make that same mistake.
Oh boy, where to begin? Well, one of my main mistakes in the early days is I had a cadre of 5 senior people. Each of them had their own area of responsibility. I was the youngest. I had always had this notion that, I think I'm pretty smart, but I'm smart enough to know I don't know everything. So I'm going to surround myself with even more smart people. But I had it in my head that if I'm going to be the leader of these smart people, I better be good at everything that they do too. And I practically burned myself out in the process. And for about a year, I was the best program designer, the best program leader. I was the best sales leader, and I'm gone 3 weeks out of the month. My marriage is falling apart, and I'm exhausted. That was a non-starter. And the problem with that is if I'm holding myself as I've got to be the best at everything, then the business can't really grow beyond my own limitations. And only a
Hmm.
fool thinks he doesn't have any limitations.
I like that. You're absolutely right. And always, otherwise, you're always chasing the next best person and losing
Exactly.
focus on the big
Exactly.
picture.
So my notion of hire good people has always been central. Get good people. And every once in a while I try and run contrary to what they were telling me, and every single time it'd turn into a train wreck. And they'd kind of look at me with them, and I go, "Yeah, okay, fine. You're
Now
right.
you mentioned, you mentioned some things, fate and maybe luck, being in the right place, right time. You grew sometimes not even though you're going to grow, you grew. I know you picked up that book, The Ultimate Athlete, but any key decision that you say, but this was really a pivotal decision I made that really was helped me with my success.
Yeah. To get started at AT&T, they'd narrowed their choice down to two companies. I won't name the other one. And they wanted us to each to do part of a program with this group of their executives. And we did. And then they were going to go off and think about it when we were all at this retreat center, right? And the head of the other company sends a message, he wants to talk to me, right? So I go over and he's a little worried that we're going to get the business and he's not. So he wants to propose some kind of a deal here. And I'm kind of thinking, and remember now I'm 31, 32. I'm a little new to this game. And suddenly I kind of realize he's kind of trying to somewhere between pay me off and bribe me to lay off a little bit. Right. And, painted all this big picture. And I'm like, no, this whole thing doesn't feel good. Yes, it would have made maybe some short-term money, but one of the things that we teach is about being in integrity. And go,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the guy who teaches this stuff, and here I am with it. Oh, good, a test. And it didn't land as oh good in the moment, but it was like, oh good. So I said no, and he was pissed, and we ended up getting all the business, and then he was really pissed, and I'm like, what are you going to do? It's like if my football team's beating your football team, then you better get better.
Yeah. I love that because, sometimes that decision went the other way. Who knows what the outcome would have been? No,
Exactly.
you would have had two losers. And,
Yeah.
yeah, good for you. Now, Chris, we're going to take a break here. Actually, a commercial break, as I mentioned before the show. Couple things. I know you have a book. If you'd like to promote why you have that book and what that book's about and where they can find it. Maybe explain who your customer is. I know you've worked from, corporate 500 companies and bigger, corporate 100 companies. Do you work with all sorts of companies? Maybe explain who your customers
Sure.
is so our listeners could see if it's a fit for them.
Well, let's start with the easy one. The book is called The Power to Transform. You can get it on Amazon or I don't know, probably not in bookstores, but you can certainly get it off of Amazon. You can get it off of our website, but to be blunt about it, Amazon will get it there faster than we will. So yeah, so The Power to Transform, it's in its third version now. So it's been redone and edited and reprinted because people seem to enjoy it. So yay, hooray! By all means, go get it. To the bigger question, our customer, the Human Potential Project, we have customers of all sizes, to be blunt about it. We've worked with startup companies. We've worked with Fortune 100 companies. Our specialty is large-scale cultural change, right? And we work with companies to move them out of, particularly the bigger ones, get stuck in this kind of process orientation, where the culture is all about following the rules and following the process and doing this and doing that, and they get blindsided by competition, so forth, and can't get out of their own way. So we show them how to be more innovative, how to mobilize, how to create real teams that can get things done. We have a whole body of work called commitment-based management, and it stands in juxtaposition to the traditional activity-based management. I'll give you a very quick history here because I don't want to go down this road because it's a long conversation. But for the most part, everything we think of as modern management practices were invented by guys who were born in the 1800s. They were designed to be effective for Henry Ford and his peers. I mean, certainly we've modernized them since, but they're all based on the certain, basic principles of, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? It's all about productivity. Management equals supervision. And you were dealing in those days with a workforce that worked out of survival. There was no social safety net in those days. So if you didn't work, you didn't eat. Now, you might have been a skilled craftsman who made beautiful wood panels for horse-drawn carriages. Here, you're going to put 5 bolts on a Model T wheel all day, every day, right? If you don't like that, too bad. So the problem they were trying to solve was, how do we get unskilled, uneducated, unsophisticated farm workers and day laborers and turn them into productive factory workers? The answer was de-skill the work. And that was born, the modern assembly line and so forth. We're great, but we're not in that world anymore. We've got a workforce that is educated, mobile, right? Sophisticated, right? And they don't do well with management as supervision because they're intelligent. They don't like that kind of stuff. It bristles them, which is what drives lots of people to say, screw this, I'm going to go start my own business, right? I don't need to put up with this BS forever. So our work is all about, based on that assumption, right? How do we learn to manage, mobilize, coordinate quickly, because that's what it takes to be effective in the world today. How do we innovate, right? And we actually have formulas and methodologies for doing all those things. So the work works. We haven't found any sector where it doesn't work, right? The critical thing for us is people have to understand that, we learned this with athletes, is that you can't change if you don't learn, and you can't learn if you don't change, right? Now everybody goes, yep, yep. But as soon as we start talking about learning, I start losing people, because learning they think of as school. I already went to school. What do I need to learn? I said, no, it's not that way. As you mentioned earlier, you got to be a constant learner. And learning is the development of new competence, a new capacity for action. That's the definition of learning. It's not about gaining insights, understanding, motivation, or any of that sort of stuff. Okay? Now, here's the thing that we learn with athletes. This is going to scramble everybody's eggs. While your mind understands, and understanding can occur in an instant, in the end, it's your body that learns. And your body only learns one way, and that's through practice. No amount of understanding ever produces competence. Only practice does. And we can see that simply, in athletic feats, but we don't tend to think of it the same way with learning to be a better leader, learning to be a better manager. It takes practice. Nobody's born great at that sort of stuff, right? So, simple analogy here, right? Are you a golfer?
I like to golf. Let me say it that way.
Yeah, same with me. I said, well, I go out on the course.
All right.
All right.
Drive the
So
cart.
let's assume for this conversation that you are committed to getting better at golf. Okay. What are you going to do? Well, the obvious answer most people give me is, I'm going to go to the range and practice. I said, ooh, well, there's a problem with that, because you've already said you're not as good as you want to be. So you're going to go to the range and practice not being good. Yeah, flaw in the plan there. You're going to read Tiger Woods' book. Is that going to get you any better? No. All right. So stay away from the Golf Channel and all that junk they sell. If you're serious about it, you're going to get a coach, right? Yes. Right. And what happens? You go to the range, you've been there, and what's the coach say? Well, let me see you take some shots. So, you hit a few shots, and she'll look at you and she'll go, hopefully she won't laugh, but she'll go, okay. So do this with your hands, move your feet this way, roll your shoulders back, stand up a little straighter, and now take some shots. What happens to those first few shots?
Terrible.
They're crap. They're terrible. Why? Because this is uncomfortable. It's
uncomfortable.
Awkward. You're not used to it. And if the coach wasn't standing there, what would you and 99% of humanity do?
Go back to my old ways.
Right? Exactly right. That's why most adults never learn anything. We refuse to be uncomfortable. You can't learn anything when you're comfortable. Yeah. And so it's true with management skills, with leadership skills, which is why all of our programs extend over time. We don't have any instant solutions. They last 3, 6, 9 months. There's on-site coaching. There's everything that it takes to put in place the new practices, so that when we leave, you don't need us anymore. I don't need to come back and do refreshers. We built it and baked it into your culture. It's part of your way of being, the organization's way of being in the world. And the results that we produce, my problem, frankly, is people don't believe me. and I show them testimonials. You know, you can talk to this guy. Yes, he got our long-term programs come with a 10x return, right? You get at least 10 times what you spend inside the time frame of the engagement, or we keep working with you till you do. We've never had to spend an extra day on a project. The minimum return any client has documented was 15x. The highest was about 65. But when you talk to people about that, they can't believe it. You know, just like the guys in the Army couldn't believe I could solve all those problems at the same time, because we have a comprehensive solution and not all these little single dibble dabble things that is what, you know, most of the HR departments dish up. Okay,
You know, it's
I'm off my soapbox now.
yeah, but I'm going to be a better golfer because of it. So thanks for that tip. All right. Let's talk about this third segment of the program. We want to talk about the future. Now, you've been around long enough. You've been up through, you mentioned the 60s, 70s, 80s. Here we are, 2024. We both experience a lot of different times in the country and the economy at different times in different years, but never have I seen, except for the last 3 years, that everything's happening all at once. You know, where we have the wars, we have inflation, we have labor issues, we get supply chain, oil, you name it, we got it. But you are a founder and you lead founders and CEOs of companies. Do you see this as a time to grow? Do you see opportunity? Is this time to retreat, sit on the sidelines? How do you see navigating these crazy times?
Well, first of all, I think we need to start with the premise. I don't think the times are any more crazy than they've been in the past, but with the advent of social media, we're kind of made to believe that they're crazy. I mean, yes, there are wars in the world. There's always wars in the world. There's always been war. We're not in any war. We're not fighting anybody. Nobody's fighting us. Yes, we're supporting, you know, Ukraine, as we should, for the record, right? But nobody's bugging us, right? Yes, inflation's happened. We've had inflation before. It's not the first time. Everybody wants to point fingers. Well, most of that's on us as business people. Everybody yacked their prices up after COVID. Nobody wants to be the first to bring them back down, right? And because of that, the interest rates aren't going to come down anytime. Well, they will, but not in a way that's going to help us all. We've got madness on the political spectrum, but let's face it, we've always had crazy people in the country. The only difference is in the old days, those nutballs would stand on the street corner on a soapbox and get laughed at, and then they go crawl back under their rock. Well, now they can get on YouTube or, you know, Instagram or whatever, and it's like, no, that guy's an idiot, right? One of them happens to be running for president, but, you know, that's still the same thing. So I would say for me, when everybody else is kind of panicky and getting nervous, one of the things that we teach is a practice called centering, right? It is your capacity to stay calm in the midst of chaos. And from there, you can see things that other people can't. So I'm of the belief that while everybody else is panicking and wanting to pull back, that's the time to move forward, right? Because you'll be able to take advantage of that moment. Everybody else is in hesitation. Take some steps forward. You know, that's my philosophy and belief.
Yeah, I like that. No, I do like that. And you're right. We have things have been going on. Sometimes we just have to do a reality check. How much is really happening and really to us, or is it or just the noise out there in the social media world? So I appreciate that. All right, let's last question. You're a rugby player. You worked hard. So that's a tough sport. So all the way back then, you had to have some discipline. Here you are, running big companies and doing great things. What do you do personally to get yourself up on Monday morning? I know you're an avid learner. We talked about that. Maybe you can share more about that. And you have mentors. You have a physical routine. You have what is it that gets you up to lead the charge every week?
Well, I do have a routine, right? So I get up in the morning, you know, do a couple of quick little things to get the day going. Then I do a meditation. Then I go off, do work for about an hour. Then I go do my physical. I take a kickboxing class 3-4 times a week, right? All right, walk. I do something physical most every day. You know, you've got to now, and it helps both, you know, move energy, keep me fit, et cetera, et cetera. I eat pretty well. I, for the most part, quit drinking. You know, I'll have an occasional beer or cigar every now and then, but for the most part, I'm kind of done with all that stuff. And yeah, I do a lot of books. In fact, it's a bit of a confession here. I'm somewhat addicted to audiobooks.
Okay.
You know, I'm an Audible, Gold Star member. Uh, I went through about 200 of them last year. And that's, the problem is you can listen lots of places you can't read. So
Right.
I know, and I do all kinds, histories and speculations about business and so forth. You've got to be able to, one of the things about leadership, as I say to everybody, look, if you're the leader of your organization, I don't care how big or how small it is, you only have two fundamental jobs. Two. I ask people, your job's leader, what is it? And they'll give me this big laundry list of us. I say, no. Number one, you are the guardian of the mood of the enterprise, particularly in seemingly turbulent times, like we were just talking about. And people are easily pulled into a little bit of panic or resignation or despair. You have to be the one who's constantly producing ambition and confidence and trust. That's what it takes if you're going to move the organization forward. And two, you're the architect of the future. So you're the guardian of the mood and the architect of the future. Part of being the architect of the future is you have to have a reading practice. Have to. It's not an option. Right. And, me, I read Wired, I look at Fortune, there's a couple of newsletters I get, some podcasts I listen to. But if you're not spending at least a half an hour or more a day reading, you're in trouble, because that's the only way you can really keep current with things. Pay attention to what's going on in the world. And from there, you can begin to look and see. And if you, as I said, had the centering practice, everybody else, and you're caught up in the swirl of social media, no. Oh, look, here's what's going on here. Here's what's going on here. Here's how that ties back to me. Here's what it's doing now. Now, if this trend keeps up for 6 months, oh, bingo, there's your move,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to be able to see
Yeah.
and feel the move.
I love that. And being an avid reader, plus you got to read, I'm sure, a variety of things, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
just so you can just kind of shake loose the other side of the brain every so
Right.
often.
Whatever industry you're in, you need to stay current with the industry publications. That's kind of a given, but not just that, because that's a little too narrow.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been fun. And I think I could probably talk to you forever, because you have just a lot of wealth of knowledge. You're fun to talk to and great stories. But unfortunately, we have to have this show come to a close. How can people get a hold of you should they feel that they would like to learn more or be a customer of yours?
Well, it's really very simple. Just go to humanpotentialproject.com and you can send us a note, contact or support. I can't even remember which button you push, but that'll enable you to reach out and be happy to talk to anybody. We're always in the mood for some risk-taking customers. People are willing to get outside the box a little bit.
That's great. And we will capture that and all the other rest of this information on the notes for the show, which will be aired in 2 to 3 weeks on all podcast platforms, as well as our YouTube channel. Chris, I never want to take for granted people like yourself who take time out of your busy day to share your wisdom with our listeners. So thank you once again. It's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Thanks, my friend. Look forward to doing it again.
Very good. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Rich LeBrun here. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, Get It Done, Entrepreneurs. If you are a successful business owner who would like to be on this program, please visit us at rlebrun.com/podcast and fill out the form, and we will reach out to you. If you got something out of this interview, would you share this episode on social media? Just do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag GetItDoneEntrepreneurs. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Go to our website, rlebrun.com, or follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.